You have one unheard message. First unheard message sent yesterday at 7:15 p.m.
Hey, Ty, it's Rich. We need to do another podcast. I know we've been doing a bunch, but you've got to get on this one. I've got Mike Browning. Can you meet me at the gate?
I'm Rich Levene, and this is Meet Me at the Gate, where we're not just talking theory, we're tackling real-world problems head-on, driving solutions that supercharge productivity and team dynamics. Every episode is a journey towards improvement, empowering you, the manager, to lead with innovation and confidence. Join us to transform everyday roadblocks into highways for success.
I love to talk about auction. Matter of fact, I'm in the parking lot of an auction right now.
Hey. But I see books. When's the last time there were books at an auction?
You don't need books at an auction. We were just talking about it yesterday. I was at another auction. Guy said, I didn't have to go to college. I spend $30,000 a month on
education
at the auction. Oh, yeah, it's good.
Hey, we're bringing Mike back. I'm bringing Mike back. This is the second time you've been on my show. Thank you. He was on my prior show that I've sunset, but if anybody wants to watch it, it's still live out on YouTube. It's Dignity Leadership Live. And in that podcast, you and I talked about servant leadership. And one thing that you threw at me, so I have my values. I've written down these different values, and trust, hope, humility, and empathy are my core values. And I asked you a question. I said, what am I missing? And you said courage. Tell me more.
Well, listen, I think courage goes to authenticity. I think courage goes to commitment. I think courage is a pretty big umbrella, and it takes courage, right? It's if you're going to be a servant leader, you're going to be committed. You have to believe it. You have to live it. Let me back up. Believe it.
Believe it.
Yeah. It's easy to say. There's a lot of cool books. I know a man that wrote a good book. There's a lot of people that want it.
Did I give you a copy?
I have it. It's signed.
All right. I was trying to make sure.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, you're not sure who you gave it to and if you signed it.
But I think courage, the commitment and the willingness to do what it takes.
So this whole podcast, what we do is auto remarketing, auctions, managers, helping managers. I'm working on giving back to the community. You've been incredible in this and giving back. If anybody doesn't know, the Mike Browning Foundation for Disaster Relief, you help families in need. If you're an NAAA auction member, right?
That's right.
And you need it's just a short-term help from disaster to actually getting a full benefit from, let's say, insurance or somebody like that. But you cover that middle gap, right?
Yeah, it really started, I'll go back to 2005. I was the general manager at Manheim, New Orleans, and we had this little thing called Katrina.
A little thing?
Yeah, just this little thing.
I sat through my first hurricane this year. They're not little.
And so there's a big need. There's a bridge. There's a gap. There's a whatever it is. In all levels of the auction, employees. So I had 112 employees that 92 of them had no place to live.
Wow.
And so we started this back in 2005 as a way to just kind of, as you said, bridge the gap. We don't make people whole.
No, but you help them. You get them to the next level.
And it's the people who need it most. We just in AAA, I think it's 102, maybe 103 people that we just helped with the last two hurricanes. And if you read the stories,
you helped one of mine.
We did. If you read the stories of the people who just said thank you, it was heartfelt. You allowed me to get a hotel room for 4 nights so I could figure it out. You allowed me to have food for my family so I could breathe. And that's what we do. So incredibly important. It's a labor of love, but it takes everyone.
It takes a village.
It does. Your auction, you helped raise a little money for that.
We did.
We just raised money from different people who gave just out of their pockets, general managers, owners, and so all that money goes to the people who need it most.
Yeah. So that's awesome. So I got a little sidetracked because I want to get that story in there. But your philosophy, so this is about helping managers become better in the auto remarketing space, but primarily, like Ty and I are always talking about auctions. You're an auction guy. So what would you tell managers at auction right now? Young, just getting going, they're green. They might have to be young. Let's just say that maybe it's their first managerial role. And what's the difference between like what your philosophy of courage and servant leadership versus straight up management, like go park the car, go clean the car, go number the car, go flip the title?
I said a little bit of it earlier in commitment. It's a word that I believe, but you got to be authentic. You have to wake up. You have to decide what you want to do. So it's easy to tell someone to go park a car, but you need to be able to communicate of why that car needs to be parked. Why does the detail have to be better than everyone else? Why should that person in San Antonio at 106-degree heat care what happens? And so I think every young manager, and we have a good manager training program, we teach that authenticity about the who's, the what's, the why. A very simple value received versus dollars spent, right? What would you do if it were your own money? If you worked in my auction, my people hate it. What would you do if it were your own money? So I think that a new manager or an old, you just got to be authentic.
I'm still old and I'm still an old manager, but you always got to be on this journey. You got to be continuing to learn all the time. And what does somebody else know that you don't know? And how can you have that inquisitive mind and be able to ask questions and realize there's too much information in the world anymore to know everything? When we started and cars didn't drive themselves to the auctions, like we could know everything. We didn't have book values coming at us every single day. We didn't have apps telling us all this different information, and all of a sudden, bam, here we are. We had a little more authority just because had experience and we were present.
This is going to sound funny. Old managers, I definitely fit that category. I humble arrogance. And it sounds funny, but believe in yourself. Believe in what you know. But be humble enough to ask. Be humble enough to communicate. Be humble enough to, why do you do it this way?
Yeah.
And I think that it's made me a much better manager because I learned from my team every day. Why do we send 26 vans of people that we have, going? Why do we send them all out at a certain time? Or why do we do this? Or why do we stagger? And those people that are doing the job will tell you all of your experience and all of your knowledge. With their insight, you put those two together, and it's a pretty good formula, I believe.
My aha moment was understanding that I didn't have all the answers and that my way wasn't the only way to do something. And it took a lot of humility. Is one of my favorite words you said, and I like the way you said it. You got to have some self-confidence.
Absolutely.
But you also got to keep your ego in check. But having some humility to understand that you don't know it all, and somebody else might have an idea. They might have a crazy idea on how to get something done, but it might be just enough to spark you to say, hey, look, the way we've always done it might not be the best way to continue to always do it.
So it brings up one of the best stories. You're going to laugh about this, and if I can hijack this for about 60 seconds.
Absolutely.
All right, so I moved to San Antonio in 2014. I'd been the general manager of New Orleans and Mississippi, 2 great sales, but smaller sales. And so now I'm in this 20-lane giant, and I'm watching the dealers sign their paperwork on the end of every block. And all of my brilliance, I have the idea. I am going to revolutionize the auction. We're going to move every lane printer down to the lane 1 wall where this big space. And my thought process was buy your cars. Rich, go buy all your cars. When you're done, every lane will be over there. You just go sign your paperwork, and it's just one-stop shop. And I sold it, and we invested $30,000 in the wiring and getting this all done. And I'm all proud, and the sales kicked off, and I'm walking around, peacock. I got this. Okay, what I didn't see was that, well, everyone having that convenience, they just waited till the end to sign their paperwork.
Oh no.
So we only sold about 1,800 cars that day.
Only?
193 buyers in line to sign their paperwork. So it took about 4 hours. So it was the greatest debacle of all times. I say that story because, number one, I had to go face it. I had to go shake every hand and apologize to take the heat. I had to uninvest that $30,000 real quick to go back to the next way. But I got to sit in front of my team, and I got to talk about failing fast. It was a great idea. I had it all whiteboarded. Mannheim was going to devote a auction to me, right? And it didn't work. So I say that, you don't know it all. I don't know it all. We don't know it all. And I should have listened,
Yeah.
but I didn't, because people told me there would be problems. But I learned and became a better manager of it. And my managers got to have a great time. They still, to this day, 10 years later, they still get to.
They send you an anniversary card.
Yeah, they get to.
You hit on a key piece, and as a leader, manager, call us whatever you want, boss. And I encourage my managers to do this all the time. Just go do something.
Yeah.
Go do something, okay? If you got a great idea, go try it. If it doesn't work, we didn't fail. That's the first attempt in learning. We learned something from it, and let's go back and figure out what we need to do different the next time in order to do it. But if you and I sit here and we talk all day about how we can run customers through the auction faster, and we never do it, we fit the 95% of the rest of the world that just talks about problems and never tries to solve them. And it doesn't get us anywhere.
No, it does not.
One of the sayings, Mike, that Rich and I use is meet me at the gate. And one of you probably know this as well as anybody, but somebody comes in, I got a problem, it's the end of the world, I have, crisis. And I always say, like, well, when was the last time you went and spent a half a day, a full day, literally just at the gate, and watch what comes in and watch what goes out and watch how they interact with everybody. And the education on a one-day, 8-hour trip at the gate changes a lot of perspectives, in my opinion. And, I hear you use the word courage, and the way that I'm hearing you guys use the word courage is it does take some kind of inner strength to be that guy that admits I did it wrong, or to be that guy that goes and hangs out at the gate for 8 hours, or whatever's going on in your world. But there's a level of courage, and I appreciate you using that word. It's good. So thanks. I'm learning a lot. I'm just sitting back learning.
He's got more knowledge in his pinky than I'll ever have in my entire body. That's why we bring the smart people onto the show, Ty.
Yeah.
So
I was the last on the list, but that's okay.
You were not the last on the list. We were just waiting for the CIA clearance. That's all we were waiting for. I want to touch on one thing, too. Okay, so you made a mistake. You admitted to it. But you told me something one time that I'll never forget. And it's like, Rich, you've got to have the ability to care. Roll that out. I mean, how did this play out with all these? You gave us the little fun version, but how do you demonstrate to your team that you care?
Well, I owned it. So I sat out there for the 3 hours that they were having to deal with that, and they were cleaning up my mistake. And so I owned it with the 100 dealers while they were in line. I would grab bottles of water. I would get chairs. I would literally sat and told dealers that this was not a Manheim thing. This was a Mike Browning mistake. What it did was, when I didn't leave, I didn't run from it. I didn't go sit in my office. I didn't go do the rest of my work. I helped them do their work, and a lot told me that how much they appreciated that. Normally, when it comes from the hill, when it comes from higher up, when it comes from the ivory tower, yeah, they're the ones left to clean up the mess, and they did have to clean up the mess. Make no mistake. But I had to own it with them, and so I earned a lot of street cred, if you will, being with them. And as we've gone on, and I've actually had some successes as we've gone on, yeah, and we've grown, and we've just because of the team, the auction we're 70% larger than we were 10 years ago. When a lot of people have slight growth or slight decline, we've grown dramatically, and it's because of mistakes and failures and learnings and the buy-in from the team that we've all grown together. We have a feel. We do a weekly meeting where we set the standard. We all go around the room, talk about the wins, but then everyone has to talk about a learning, and everyone, no matter what. And if you didn't have a learning for the week, we didn't try hard enough. And that learning, call it a failure, call it a mistake, call it an opportunity, call it whatever you want, whether it's safety. And most of our learnings are safety related. Hey, we could do this to be better. We could do this to be better. And we just help grow. And it all spawned from that debacle.
So cover that again, because that's important for managers to know. Like if you're having a meeting, so you said you did two things. You talked about your wins or your successes, and then you talked about, we'll call it wins and losses, right?
Yeah.
So that is like right there's a meeting formula, right? To get it all out, and then we can have learning growth. If I recall correctly, you played college baseball, correct?
Well, I was on the team, yes.
You know what? You were so humble that I know. Did you ever? Well, let's not go there. I'll get it out of you in a second. What did you learn playing college baseball that you could apply today to what you do?
This is going to sound funny. One of the greatest lessons. Coach brings us all in. This is in the fall before we're really
fall
starting.
Ball?
Yeah. So the incoming freshmen, a couple of transfers, we're all sitting at a conference table, and the upperclassmen are kind of standing around the room. And Coach walks up there, and he has a big rope, big ship rope, 2 knots on the side. It's about 3 feet long. Throws it on the table. He says, "Okay, you're hanging off the side of the cliff for your life. Who do you want to hold the other end of the rope?" And so you naturally look around.
You don't want me.
I see
skinny.
I see big, tall Rich. And I picked Joey Bell, Albert Bell in the pros. Big, strong.
Albert Bell, was that his brother's son?
No, that was Joey Bell. He was Joey Bell in college.
He was Albert Bell?
And then when he came to the Cleveland Indians.
I was going to say, I remember Cleveland Indians. I got his rookie card.
So
all right, sorry.
Everyone picked somebody.
Yeah.
And he kicked the easel, slammed the door, walked out, knocked the chalkboard kind of funny. So disappointed. Turned right around, came back in, and says, "Until you understand the correct answer is anyone on this team, Coach, will never be a team." Wow. Lesson was that you had to trust, you had to work, you had to communicate, you had to do everything. And I really took that to heart. It's something I believe today. If you walk into my auction or any auction that I've run, and I can name you some superstars that we've had at all 3 auctions. But the one thing that if you ask me who's the best, I'll just point at the team. The whole team. Because there's nothing that any of them won't do or can't do or shouldn't do. And I another funny story, and I wish I'm going to have to get Sandra to listen to this. So I take over. We have no AGMs. I have to get 2 AGMs, and the regional vice president saying we're going to start the process, and absolutely so one day I walk in, and I'm still traveling back and forth to Mississippi, and I walk into our controller's office, CPA, just decorated individual, and I asked her, I said, "Listen, I'm not very good at paperwork. I have a stack of T&Es. Who can I get to do these?" And I've been on the job a month. I don't know anyone in accounting. And she stood up, all 4'2" of her, and just said, "Do you see what's on this blanking wall? Do you see who I am? You're asking me to do your T&Es?" And I said, no, Sandra, no. So it was just an incredible. She kicked me out of her office.
Is that the Sandra I know?
It is. So she kicks me out of her office. I get on the plane. I text my boss. I said, "I found our AGM of operations." And so I come back the next week, and hey, I need to see you in my office. So she's teary-eyed. She thinks it's over.
Oh, goodness.
And I offer her the job. And she said, "Why would you do that?" I said, "Well, number one, you're absolutely right. Be confident in who you are. Number two, you need to stand up. You need to stand up for what's right. But number three, I want to show you that you can do anything, whether it's T&Es, whether it's being a controller." And so she took the job. 10 years later, she's one of the best operations AGMs in Mannheim. She immediately, I did get a little revenge. I sent her to detail. She was just beautifully dressed, heels, skirt, the whole 9 yards. And I said, "You're in detail today." And so it's a good thing between us. But she is a rock star. The whole point of that story is no matter who you are, no matter where you are, I have a team that I will tell you that if I were hanging off a cliff, I'll pick any of them. And that's what we all have to do. That's what you need to do. That's what that's every one of us need to do in leadership. Develop your team.
Bingo. Leaders create more leaders. Yeah. If you're not willing to help mentor other people, then it's really, in my opinion, it's really not leadership. But you've fallen short, and everybody has a different definition of leadership. But I'm gonna have the story of this rope, and then I'm gonna have this imagination of this 4'2" power figure. I'll be back in the office real soon. I'm gonna tiptoe. I'm gonna tiptoe lightly.
Well, I love the rope story. I've never heard that one. That was a good one. I think I might use that one too sometime. But it makes complete sense, yeah. I mean, in my industry, Mike, transportation, Rich and I always have a bet. I did pretty good on that one, Rich. I made it a long time.
No, you didn't. We got it. I'm leaving it. I'm going to ring the bell. It was less than 30 seconds into the show. We've got you. So we have Ty and I have this thing going during the podcast. It's how long can we get into the show before Ty mentions anything to do with transportation? And we got an over-under. And then we also, well, that's an over-under, but we also have a time, right? So how many minutes? And then how many times does Ty go back and have a comparison and tie it back? But what is cool is,
Can I say one thing real quick?
Yeah.
So, Ty, good job in transportation. If it really was 30 seconds,
you're right.
You're different. You're on time, right? Normally we're late in transportation.
Exactly.
So good job, right?
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
Exactly.
I had
Kudos.
to.
No, that is perfect. But it's how the human brain works, and we go back to what we know, right? You got to tie back an event back to something you know or done in the past. And I'm always constantly challenging my team, and this is where we talk about the learning and where it comes into critical thinking skills. Is all right. Safety is a perfect example. When we see an incident or an accident happen, let's say there's a car wreck in the intersection. Here come the flashing lights, the cops, the ambulance, and there's 5 or 6 people that witness the accident. The cop comes over and asks you for your story, and you recite the story, how it happened. Then the police officer will go over to the next person and then recite the story, and they go all the way around. And then they come back and they compare them. And I kid you not, there's going to be 5 completely different versions of how that incident or accident happened, because everybody puts it in a frame of mind based on their knowledge on what they believe to be true.
Correct.
So that's where I keep challenging people. It's like, look, you've got to have this mindset. And that's what your coach did with the rope thing. You believed to be true that you were going to find the strongest, tallest, whatever. And you picked me because I had long arms. I could reach farther of the cliff. Okay. But you got to reframe your brain, reframe your thinking process. Like, no, if you need survival and you need to make it to the next level and you need to live, you got to be able to trust everybody in the room.
And that takes courage. Listen, you really have to. That's hard to do. It's really hard to commit yourself to be that vulnerable. It's really hard to commit yourself to be that committed. And back to courage. And I'm sorry, Ty, I keep using it, but I believe it. I think that you have to go all in.
Yeah, you got to be all in, because if you're not all in, and that's where we talk about how long does it take for Rich to talk about value-based leadership in a podcast? So 24 minutes. So we take the values, but I talked about it earlier. I mentioned mine. When you set up values, so yours could be courage, and I'm not sure how you use it in your organization. What I use is the 4 values that I mentioned we wrote about in the book that I may have given you a copy of.
Signed in my office.
Signed in your office. Holy cow. It's not going to be worth anything. But, so let's go through the 4 values real quick. Everybody should know them by now: trust, hope, humility, and empathy. But what that does is it gives us a framework for decision making. It doesn't make the decision. It makes the decision easier to make, but it doesn't make doing it any easier in real life. So customer comes in and they've got a problem, or a vendor wants to do business with you, or you've got an employee that may not be following and you have to have a conversation. If you can frame it up on the values and say, this is what we believe in, this is what we're doing, and you fit it, great, we're going to help you along, or you don't fit it, and that's where it gets uncomfortable. Like, look, hey, you're not fitting what we're trying to do. I'm going to let you go. And when I was a manager, I was coached several times by HR or mentors or whatever, like, hey, Rich, they don't fit what we're doing. But nobody defined what we were doing. We were selling cars at an auction. Okay, that's a thing, right? It's an action. It's not a value. But when we said, hey, we're selling cars based on building more trust with everybody that wants to be here, we're going to be humble about it. We're going to show some empathy, and we're going to create some hope. Like, we want people to want to be here. Now you've got a value system to tie it to, and your decision becomes a lot easier. And I can have the conversation with you like, hey, Mike, it's just not working out. You're really not building up any trust with the team. You're not creating any hope. And remember that one day you went out and you hollered at the guys for that wasn't being empathetic. That was actually kind of egotistical. But and when I do that, and that's what I tell with managers is we built this in, I can go back to HR and say, hey, this isn't working. And here's what now it's working. They go, all right, cool. If I don't have that basis to go back on, or that framework, my story is just like, then it's like, hey, Rich, you need to go document stuff. Well, what am I going to go document? The guy or gal's not doing their job.
Right.
And then it's on me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that I'm somewhat naive. I believe that every employee I have wakes up and wants to come in and do a good job. I know there may be one or two, right? But you, and your point is that you give them a North Star.
Bingo. Yeah. So
you can have that conversation. So I can have that conversation. If I'm your leader, I can say, now listen, where did we go wrong? What did I do? Because this is how we do it, and we're not getting there. Give the example. And more often than not, you won't need to change that employee. They'll change themselves.
Yeah, bingo, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, for better or worse. They'll find a better fit, or they'll buy in.
Absolutely. And you'll find out you'll get them in and you'll get them out. And that's exactly what we need. And you give them that North Star and then bam, everything starts to make sense. And you can assemble it. And the other piece is I go back and I tell these people all the time, I'm like, hey, I'm using these values. And then, of course, I did a crazy thing and wrote a book about it. So now I've put it in the universe. So I am front and center on the stage. And if I make a mistake, guess where all the employees are? Hey, Rich, do you think that?
Your book. Hey, you said on page 7.
Absolutely. And then that's where the humility and the empathy has to come in. You know what? You're right, Mike. I did screw up. I was really bad. I would take the humility and the empathy and say, tell me about your side version. But here's the other thing. I'm not a robot. I'm a human being.
That's right.
I make mistakes. I'm going to make more mistakes. But when we start having these conversations and we have a framework for it and people can line up with the values, now we've got something. We've got traction, right? And you sell cars. I sell cars. How many auctions are in your city? There's 3, 4?
4.
There's 8 in mine.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's 12 right there, and we've only covered a little sliver of Texas, right? You got Dallas, you got down south, you got Big Valley, you've got all these other auctions, but we've got to differentiate ourselves. I'm selling cars. I'm bringing dealers in. I'm trying to make money for the organization that hired me, that bought the auction. Right?
You're an investor.
That's exactly, they're investing. So the one thing that differentiates us from the competition, and I'm going to throw it out there. Competition may be listening. I am trying to build a culture where anybody wants to be. Mike Browning, if you want to be here as a competitor or a visitor to come see what I'm doing, I'm not going to kick you out at the door. I'm not going to have facial recognition say, oh, here comes somebody from the competition. Do not let him in. Come on in. Would you like a glass of water? Do you want a cup of coffee? Hey, come out and check what we're doing. Hey, have you met my friend Ty out at the gate? You need to go talk to Ty because he can probably share. We probably have somebody in common that's moving cars back and forth. I know we do. I've talked to those transporters. But if we start bringing people in and embrace them, I think that's what sets us apart from everybody else.
I couldn't agree more. I'll tell you, from my time as president with the NAAA and still being involved with the National Auction Association, I get to visit auctions. And everyone welcomes me because I'm in AAA, right? But
No, they welcome because you're Mike Browning.
No. But some of the greatest stories, or I say stories, that's not true. Some of the greatest operational things that I've learned from other auctions. And so whether it's John Poteet when he was in Hammond, or Bob McConkey, or up in the Northeast where I got to see my first quad block, not double block, quad block. Yeah, or South, that was in the Northwest. But I learned, and so to your point, that's what I build. That's what I want. I want you to come. Lisa from Big Valley, I've invited her a million times. She kicks my butt every day. But I want them to see our culture, our safety, our operation, our positive.
Because you're proud.
I am. I'm proud of the
and
team.
You should be. And
Absolutely.
That's the other thing is you got to have pride in your work. And that ties back to what you mentioned earlier, and I stole from your notes, is you got to show people you care. You're proud about what you're building. You're proud about what you're doing. And that's what I'd say for managers trying to grow up. Whatever you're trying to do, you're going to be proud. So let's go back to what I read a lot of books. I always tell everybody on here I read a ton of books. One of my favorite books is 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Habit number 7.
Covey.
Yep, Stephen Covey. You know, it's the end. It's begin with the end in mind. Okay, you're dead. What do you want people to say about you at your service? Do you even want people at your service? You know, and so now you start and you go back and you reframe that. It's like everything you do today, they're going to remember on the day you die. How you treated them. It's not what you say to them. It's how you treated them. And my grandmother told me that. It's like, she said this, and she was one of the only people that could ever call me Richard. Her and my mom. She said, Richard, just remember to keep your words sweet. You may have to eat them someday. And I'm like, what do you mean, Grandma? And she said, people will never remember what you say to them, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
So I can say one thing to that. My father, who passed away 4 or 5 years ago, when we were sitting there, and my father was very community involved, just did a lot of work. We don't have time for those stories, but there was a gentleman that I didn't know, a city councilman, that came up to me and put his hand on my back and said, your dad cared. To your point, I don't know that anyone else could ever say anything nicer about me, or at least in what I want, what they. So he cared, and that's what we have to do today. Today, when you call back to your auction and they talk about how happy that you're not there, or they, I don't know, Ty, would they say that? But when your customers or whomever it is, they need to know that you care.
Yeah.
And so that's
You got to show your team how much you care about them.
yeah, absolutely.
And then in return, they'll care about you. Let's take this home. Will you be willing to share my favorite Mike Browning story about the one time when you were playing baseball and you were the pitcher?
Oh, where I had to hit him.
Where you had, yeah. Will you share that with us?
So there was this. We were in Auburn, Alabama, and a young man was coming to the plate that had a pretty good career, Mr. Thomas, Frank Thomas. And so here I am, this scrawny freshman, brought in to hit him. That's my job. We had an open base, and he had been killing us, and so I was told to hit him. And so I run in, and I didn't know what he was doing. Coach hands me the ball, just says, just hit him. Let's get this over with. And then the real pitcher can come in. And so the catcher looks at me and says, just run. I'll try to trip him, just run. So I do my warm-ups. I throw my very first pitch, which if I could have thrown that pitch every time, we wouldn't be here today. But it was right down the middle. I didn't come close to it.
You didn't come close to hitting him.
Didn't even come close. And I meant to hit him. Catcher looks at me dumb. Coach looks at me dumb. Throws the ball back, calls a different pitch. I say, all right, let's do this one. I know I can hit him. And he swings over the top because it was the greatest pitch I've ever thrown in my life. The coach calls time. We've got him down 0-2. I'm thinking he's coming out, changing his mind, saying, let's get it. And he's looking at me and he says, if I don't hit him, I'll never throw another pitch for this university ever again in my life. Pretty deflating. I wound up, I just as well hit him with a soft toss, underhand. The message didn't get sent. And the great story is I never pitched again. I did get to play, but I never pitched again. So that story's good because it taught me I was a little arrogant coming in. I didn't quite work on my craft. I didn't expect to go in. So there's a laundry list of lessons.
And if I'm correct, Frank Thomas is now in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Yes, and I am on a podcast.
And I'm not going to be in anybody's Hall of Fame.
Oh, man.
I might be in the Ty Thompson Transportation Hall of Fame, but I'm not going to be in any other Hall of Fame.
Oh, well, that's a great story.
Yeah. Mike, thank you for joining us on Meet Me at the Gate. You're always incredible.
Yeah. Well, Ty,
Mike,
Rich, thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.
Hope I didn't bore you to.
You're like a mentor to me, and I'm trying to give back and mentoring to people. You've been incredible. You've done awesome things in your auction. And before, I didn't know you before, but I go out in the world. I may know a few people. I've run and bumped into them, and I'm always like, "Hey, do you know Mike Browning?" And they epitaph on your gravestone. They always have something good to say.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Meet Me at the Gate. I hope the conversation has helped to fuel your drive and equip you with insights to steer your team towards success. Remember, the road to success is always under construction. And until next time, keep your engines revving and your gas tanks full.